President Biden left the Middle East yesterday after his first trip there as president, almost 18 months after he took office. A year ago this month, Biden announced the end of the last major American combat mission in the Middle East, in Iraq. So, how is Iraq faring today? And what is America's current relationship with the other major countries of the Middle East? Who better to ask than Barham Saleh, the president of Iraq? President Saleh, lovely to have you again.
Thank you for having me, Farid.
President Biden going to Saudi Arabia, almost shaking hands with MBS, fist bumping. Was it the right thing to do to mend fences?
Obviously, Saudi Arabia is a very important country in the Middle East, and the United States is also a major global power, and this relationship needed to be brought to a better standing, and I'm sure this is an opportunity to speak to the issues.
You know, you're very well schooled in the ways of the West, the values of the West. A lot of people feel that, you know, MBS, because of the murder of Khashoggi and things like that, that Biden shouldn't have done this, that, you know, it was compromising American human rights. I tend to think he did the right thing, but what do you say to those people?
Look, at the end of the day, nations act upon their interests. Values remain important and critical. I'm sure human rights remain a very, very important aspect to any nation that respects itself. At the end of the day, there is a much, much bigger story that is out there, and Saudi Arabia is an important player. And to be fair, the Saudi government at the moment is engaged in a significant program of modernization that needs to be watched closely and need to be appreciated for its implications for the wider neighborhood.
Talk about that. So you do think that what MBS is doing
is quite impressive in terms of the modernization he's bringing about to Saudi Arabia and taking on some of the extremist elements that has essentially had a free reign for so many years.
Saudi Arabia's foreign policy, though, had been quite active even before MBS, and particularly toward Iraq. After the American intervention, the Saudis sort of treated Iraq as if it was an Iranian client state. They were not very welcoming and friendly. Has that changed under MBS?
I think Iraq has changed and has been projecting itself and its values to our entire neighborhood. This is not about a zero-sum game. Iran is our neighbor. We have vital national interests in developing good relations with Iran. We do not want to go back to the days of Saddam Hussein where we are at war with our neighbor. We fought 8 years. Iraqis were committed to this war, and we had to fight it with our blood and our treasure on behalf of others. We're not going to do that again. By the same token, Saudi Arabia is an important neighbor of Iraq. It's in our interest to develop Iraq's relations with what I call its Arab depth. Saudi Arabia is an important part of that Arab domain. And I hope that Iraq, by virtue of its geopolitics, will really play that role as a balancer in the neighborhood. We do not want to be a staging ground for offending, threatening the national security of any of our neighbors, but by the same tokens, we do not want them interfering in our affairs. A sovereign, stable Iraq should be the common interest of our neighborhood.
Iraq is at this point, given what's happening in Tunisia, the only Arab democracy. Is it a stable democracy?
Look, democracy by nature is messy and difficult. Iraq is a nascent democracy. We have had elections about 8-9 months ago. Unfortunately, we have not been able to bring it to a closure and establish a new government. Iraqi political actors have been engaged in all kinds of legal maneuvering through our Supreme Court. It is disappointing that we have not been able to bring it to a closure, but we're trying hard. We're not fighting it in the streets. We're fighting it through the legal, parliamentary system that we have. And I very much hope that even though it is precarious, even though it is nascent and it is yet to be deep-rooted, but Iraqi democracy has something to offer our neighborhood. Remember, Iraq was dominated by autocracy and tyranny for decades, and a nation out of that experience, a nation that was experiencing terrorist onslaughts day in, day out for the last 20 years, still committed to at least the parameters of a constitutional democratic process with all the frustrations it poses. I would take that over dictatorship and tyranny any day.
When we come back, President Biden has been trying to convince Israel and Saudi Arabia that the region would be better off if Iran were back in the nuclear deal. What does President Saleh think, and how dangerous are the tensions between Iran and Israel? We are back here on GPS with more of my interview with Iraq's President Barham Saleh, talking about Iran and the rest of the region. One of the things that President Biden was trying to do in the trip, I think, was find a way to have a better understanding of what to do about Iran. And I think he was trying to convince, in particular, the Israelis and the Saudis, that it actually makes sense for Iran to go, and the United States to go back into the Iran nuclear deal, put limits on Iran's nuclear program. Do you think President Biden is right? Should we all be trying to get that deal put back together?
Iran is a major actor in that part of the world. And for me, in Iraq, we have long borders with Iran. We have all kinds of interactions, social, cultural, common security interests, you name it. So obviously this is an issue of consequence to us and is a consequence to the wider region and indeed the world. There is no military solutions to these. We need a diplomatic closure to this stalemate. We need a security arrangement in the Middle East where we can come together to combat terrorism, which remains a major problem. Look at where Syria is, look at northern Syria, look at the militants that exist and take base in Syria that still pose a real threat to the stability, not just the Middle East, but also the wider world. Compare that to Afghanistan in 2001, where few men were in the remote caves of Afghanistan and could manage to pull off that terrible attack on September 11th. And now we're talking about thousands and thousands of militants, well-equipped, well-trained, in the heartland of the urban Middle East. It's a danger. We need to bring the neighborhood together as part of a common architecture to push back against these elements, but also really attend to the fundamental challenges that the Middle East is facing. Jobs, economic challenges that we are faced with, the terrible climate changes that are affecting the entire neighborhood.
But so let me translate what I think you're saying, which is, yes, we should have a nuclear deal,
yes,
but it's even more than that. You are talking, I think, about
an integration of our part of the world.
And a kind of reconciliation between Iran and the Arabs?
Absolutely. And by the way, on that count, Iraq is playing a very important role in trying to mediate between the Saudis and the Iranians. There have been a number of conversations that have taken place in Baghdad between Iran and other Arab neighbors, and there are some important atmospherics that have improved. At the end of the day, we need to sit down at the same table and talk about the problems that are of consequence to our own constituents. At the end of the day, yes, America matters, yes, the world matters, but also our own priorities in our part of the world matter.
But this is not where things are, Mr. President. Right now what's happening is Saudi Arabia is making a tacit alliance with Israel. The UAE has effectively made an open alliance. And that is more like the old containment strategy of two warring camps.
I think this is, again, if you go back to history, this is a recipe of repeating the terrible tragedies of the past. This part of the world cannot go on like this. We are blessed with having oil, but we also have very serious challenges, economic and social challenges. We need infrastructure that can connect our economies together. We need common action against climate change. Iraq cannot do it alone. Saudi Arabia cannot do it alone. Iran cannot do it alone. The Turks cannot do it alone. Syria, at the end of the day, has to be brought back into the fold, and we need to find a way by which we get Syria out of the mess that it is in today, has been in for so long. While we are focused on the headlines of interstate rivalries between Iran, Saudis, this and that, at the end of the day, there are really big challenges confronting each and every state in that part of the world. We don't want to go back to the days of the past where we are part of axis against another. We did that and we paid dearly for it. We have too many priorities to do that again.
Why are you optimistic, finally?
I'm a realist. We have many challenges and many difficulties, but life is about trying to make it happen. I do believe that our part of the world has many resources, is blessed and endowed with good natural resources, but above all also we have good people, talented people who deserve a better way of life, and they can do it. And you see a lot of developments in our part of the world. Yes, it's messy, yes, confusing, as I was explaining to you about Iraq. I'm not telling you that Iraq is fantastic. It's absolutely not. Iraqis deserve a lot better than what we have today. But at the end of the day, the kind of debate that we have in Baghdad about making life better for Iraqis, changing the political system, improving, reforming, gives me hope that we can do better, and you have to try. We have been blessed with an opportunity, and we should not squander it. We have to try at it.
Mr. President.
Thank you, my friend.
Next on GPS, from one of the last big wars to the current one, I will talk to the Foreign Minister of Finland, Russia's neighbor that is poised to become one of the newest members of NATO. Where does Helsinki see Moscow's hostilities going from here?